Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. And welcome back to the show. We are excited to have our friend here, Tony Marolt. Lead Left, Grow Right LLC is the name of the company, and he is our chief leader and president from Kansas City, Missouri. Welcome back today. How are you?
I'm doing terrific, Joe. How about yourself?
I'm doing okay. I'm coming down with a little bit of a cold, so physically not feeling so wonderful, but I'm excited to be here and I'm still in good spirits. Thank you. What about you? You had a little injury.
Yeah, I had a little, my right wrist is most likely broken. But I'm also coming off a cold. So,
okay.
So we're compadres today.
Oh, well, I hope you get better, heal better quick. How long do they say it's going to take?
They have to wait 3 weeks just to see if it's officially broken because it was so swollen up that the x-rays couldn't penetrate. So.
Oh my goodness. Are you a righty or lefty?
I'm a righty, so yeah, it's on my primary hand. So.
Okay. Well, thank you for being here with us today. Please introduce yourself to our listeners.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tony Marolt. I am the chief leader and president of Lead Left, Grow Right. I come from a background in the military for 9 years in the Navy and also in the corporate world at Hallmark Cards, where I served in a variety of positions, both in the supply chain and in technology for 25 plus years. And I've written a book called The Leadership Quotient to try and distill all that learning into practical things. I think that's the emphasis, practical things that people can then leverage in their own leadership journeys.
Wonderful. And what did you have in store for us today? We had some great conversations. We've been going over chapters of the books. Unfortunately, I don't have notes for you today.
They were supposed to send them to you.
They were supposed to be attached in the email, and they're not there. At this point, I got to tell you. So
okay.
I just reached out to them.
No, that's good.
But I know we promoted last week's show. Last time we spoke. Until I get them officially, I'll have you start if you don't mind. Thank you.
Sure. So today I thought we'd cover chapters 4 and 5. Chapter 4 is pretty short, but still pretty powerful. And chapter 5 is something that I felt I had to put into the book as I was writing it due to a lot of the discussions around truth and what truth really is, both in our print media, movies, everything else, as to what's really truth. And so that chapter is about driving it out. We can talk about that in a little bit more.
Perfect. I'm excited. Bring it on, Stanley.
Oh, that's funny you say that. Oh, you should see Stanley. Yeah. So again, the shirt Stanley. Stanley was an innovator himself. I mean, he was doing comics when he was 17 years old and managing other folks. So you don't have to. I actually have a little graphic. I'll have to bring it maybe next time. That it's from a long time ago, Reader's Digest, but it talks about how old people that were the leaders of our country are. Like George Washington was like 21 or 22 when he was leading the entire army. So it's a powerful statement as to doesn't matter how old you are, you can always become a leader and improve on being a leader. So I thought in chapter 4. The main quote that I start off with is, and it's called "Look to the Future and Create It." I think that's a really critical thing for all leaders. I'm sorry, I'm bouncing around here.
It's okay. It's what we do.
It's really critical for all leaders in that leaders have to set a vision or at a minimum a goal. So whether you're part of a team or whether you're the CEO of the company, you have to strive for a goal or strive for the future. And so this chapter is about that. And then chapter 5 is called That's a Fact, Jack. And that's from the movie Stripes, which if you haven't seen it, Bill Murray says that. That's the name of the chapter, and it has to deal with facts. So why don't we talk about chapter 4? So the primary quote in chapter 4 is, we must leave the past in order to lead the future. And the short version is, too many people focus on the past. Well, and it can come from a lot of different angles. So some people say, the old veterans that have been in a company for a long time will say, well, we've already tried that before. Okay, so you've tried it before, but have the circumstances changed? If they've changed, that still might be a really good idea. Or in fact, it might be a really terrible idea. So let's talk about it. So there are those who are stuck in the past, so to speak. They don't want to move forward. And then there are people that use corporate memory, not just in saying we can't do that, but to say, well, that individual who was leading at the time said this should happen or that should happen. Well, those same people aren't there. And I have a good friend, Pam at Hallmark, and she was told this one time. I thought it was really important. She was told, and I believe this, trust that those leaders that made the decision at that time and with specific conditions that existed at that time made the very best decision they could. And too often people spend time wrangling about, well, they kind of do the blame game. Well, so-and-so did that and the project turned out terrible or whatever it might be. And so they look into the past, and you have to take the problem solving focus away from they caused it to they made the best decision they can. Here's the problem in front of us. What are we going to do now about solving that problem? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does for sure. And you mentioned we must leave the past to lead the future, right?
Right.
And we must leave the past. It's so hard, and it's important though. A lot of people I know are also stuck in the past. That really makes me think about someone in particular who just doesn't get out of the past. And the truth is, their life is not moving forward. Everything relates back to when I was a child, when I was a kid with my parents. And I don't know if I'm not going to say it the right way, but I say to this person, mentally, yes, it's something not right. Why are you always there? What's so not happy in your own life now that draws you back to that aspect of your life? Because we all have some, not all, but most of us have some great childhood memories, but to really want to be back in that, it just, as an adult, it's bizarre to me, but everybody's body's different and mine's different. So I'm really thinking about someone in particular as we're speaking today. And it's interesting that I'm learning a lot about them. Okay.
Yeah. Well, and you're right. Sometimes you get the proverbial story of the guy who was a jock in high school or the girl who was a jock in high school, and they're not playing sports anymore, but they always want to relive the glory days, right? That was a really great time for them or whatever. And then on the reverse side, you have people that had just absolutely, it could be miserable upbringings with a parent who is dysfunctional, such as alcoholism or drug addiction, or in school, they were perhaps the nerd who had to keep to themselves because they were bullied every day. And with online bullying now, it's even more difficult for kids because you can destroy people really, really quickly. So I think those two things, both a positive and a negative, keep people, if everyone is a tree, they keep their roots planted in the past instead of replanting and repotting every time something in their life changes. So I think you're right, and it has a huge effect on people, and that's part of why I say you have to really know the folks on your team. You may never get to that point, but surprisingly, some people will come out and tell you about either the tragedy or the shortcoming that they have. Yeah, I tend to put people up on pedestals because this is what happened, and I'm still doing that today. So. So when you can address some of those things, and sometimes as a official leader, you can direct them to mental health services or counseling of some sort to be able to do that. So, So we have it at the individual level in society, and we have it at the corporate level. And then even the country we have our memory of our history. And I don't think we study history enough anymore, particularly civics, but we have these historical moments that have happened, and that really can damage the national psyche, or bend it towards, well, we need to do something about this because that happened 30 years ago. And sometimes that's healthy, and sometimes it's not healthy to be doing that.
Wow. And let me ask you, you mentioned fail forward versus flail forward. Can you explain all this?
Yeah. So a lot of times people are afraid to fail. And I know sometimes I personally have had that. It's okay. I'm the first of seven, so I'm the firstborn. So you're out there charging through things, but at the same time, you sometimes can end up being more of a perfectionist, and so you don't want to try something that is possible that you're going to fail at, and so that retards your growth if you're not able to deal with that. So everyone fails. This quote is about, how do you manage the recovery from failing? Are you going to fail forward and say, what did I learn, or a team, what did we learn from what happened, and how can we be better next time? And that's called failing forward. You can fail, and then sometimes you flail. You just, to our point about being stuck in the past, you can flail around after you fall. Something happens, things didn't go your way, right? Wrong decision got made that you think it happened, or something in your personal life, whatever it is that you failed at. Then sometimes people just flail around. They don't know how to recover from that failure. And so sometimes that can mark them for life, or at least slow them down for many months. Whereas if they failed forward and thought about, yeah, this is a horrible, terrible situation, but what can I learn from it? Or what are the positives in it as well as the negatives? And that allows your mind to move things forward, and put you in a better place to address real concerns.
Interesting. Now, let me ask you about, are we going to continue, on with the, what was it about leadership, about becoming a great leader? That's what I read, right? To
Right.
continue along that, to the thought process that goes along with becoming a great leader. Was that what was next?
Yes. So the quote I have in there, probably no one's ever said before, probably some of these no one's ever said before, but I grew frustrated in the corporate world when I would hear someone say, well, that person's a thought leader. Well, what is a thought leader? Is it truly an expert, or is it a thought leader, someone who has a vision and can take us forward? Thought leader is great, but in order to be a truly great leader, not only do you have to be a thought leader and have new ideas and new opinions and goals to take people through, but you have to be I call it a thought listener. So you have to be not just the guy that comes up with all these great ideas and you're known as a thought leader. You should be a thoughtful leader in that you listen to people and you are open to your opinion. So if you have the latest, greatest idea and you just put it forward and you just marshal it on your own, but you don't get other people involved and say, hey, is this a good idea or not so good idea? Then we can implement stupid things, honestly. So you have to be a thought listener. And then from that, I say thought actionship, or taking the fact that you had a great idea, you've now added a listing campaign. So you've tested that idea with others. And so now it's probably a pretty good vetted idea. Well, then the next step and the final step is to put it into action. And so I call that whole process, if it's done successfully, end-to-end thought transmission. So you take a thought and you take it to its conclusion. And the conclusion might be, we're not going to implement the idea.
Yeah. Wow. And now you've been doing this for quite some time. Just for those that don't know a little bit about your background, new to this, yes, we know you're an author. Yes, you're here with your own company, but just a little bit of your background that gave you all this experience. Could you just share that with us before we continue?
Oh yeah, sure. So probably my earliest leadership, and I think it's still the greatest leadership laboratory in the world, it was in Boy Scouts. And in Boy Scouts, if it's truly done correct, you have a boy-led troop. That means boys get to fail, make mistakes under the guidance of the
Mm-hmm.
scoutmasters. But the scoutmasters in some troops lead. They tell the boys, okay, go out. Here's what you need to get on your checklist before we go camping. That's not going to grow great leaders. The ones that are great are where you have these experiences where you can have an 11-year-old boy and a 17-year-old boy, and they're both gaining leadership experiences, and sometimes that's by failing, and sometimes that's by succeeding. So they get to experience both of those, and you don't really get that in any other kind of organization. And then from there, I went to Naval Academy, and you learn a lot about military history and how to lead people from a military aspect.
Yeah.
And so then I took that experience and kind of began to start melding, okay, what do I want to be as a leader? And I tried to start doing that while I was in the military. And then when I went into the corporate world, I had jobs from distribution to engineering to procurement to technical systems and procurement, just all over the place. And so in every juncture, I had a different team. And so I would try to learn what I could from myself and from my team. And then based on those experiences, I developed a lot of these lessons that I've incorporated into the leadership quotient.
Got it. Well, I love hearing it. And I think it's important for our listeners to know who we're speaking with at all times. And we'll get back on script in a sense, if you don't mind. Again, we're talking today about chapter 4, looking into the future in a sense, creating it, not
Yep,
looking back, right? And then chapter
right.
5, that's a fact, Jack. I like that one. My son's name's Jackson, by the way.
Oh,
Okay, okay. So we talked about the thought concept and how to become a great leader. Now, you've also mentioned in the past a couple of times about that fact, Jack. That's
yep.
chapter 5, the Bill Murray in the movie Stripes. So what really drove you to that?
So, so there's everyone always has a bias, and we know that. But we began to break ground from Tony's opinion. People began to truth when it used to be much more clear or not clear, right? More black or white. And there was always some gray area, and there always has been. But now that gray area has opened up from this, which was a healthy gray area, to this. And now I was starting to see articles or watch TV programs or get stuff off of the internet, and it showed me that people were widening the version of truth. And eventually what that turned into in many cases was, this is the truth because I say it's the truth.
Yep.
So their personal truth became the truth when it might have been factually incorrect. And that played out again through in our society in a variety of different situations, as we discussed elements, or in states as they debated different things. It certainly played out on the national stage, where we even it got so bad that we then adopted a term called fake news.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and fake news is each side of a political party would say, well, that's fake news. And the reason they would say it's fake news is because it wasn't what they wanted to hear.
Yeah.
So basically, fake news was, in my opinion, a cheap way of calling someone a liar, or someone who didn't agree with you, call it fake news. And then everyone else is supposed to say, oh, well, if it's fake news, then I shouldn't trust that. And the reality is everyone is putting out some version of the truth, but sometimes what they call truth, and you see it in the media a lot, is they leave out facts, and so that's a fact, Jack. Or the worst thing they do is they leave out context. And one of the things that is really, I see it all the time. This is a great way. If you want to pretend you're really smart, but get away with having to tell people you're really not that smart, is just use a percentage. Because if you just put out a percentage, it could be something scary like 70% of the people in northern Minnesota contract Lyme disease every year.
Wow.
So you could say that. Now, if I tell you the population in northern Minnesota is 5, that's not a big deal, is it?
No.
Right? 70% of 5.
Yep.
Now, if it's 70% of 500,000, that's a big deal. And so a lot of times what you'll see on screens, and I urge you and others, everyone that's listening, to when you see a percentage next time, see if they put the basis for the percentage, because that's what's most important. If you don't have a reference item, 60% of something is not really anything meaningful. 60% of 5,000 is 3,000. That's a big deal, right? Now, if I tell you, for instance, hey, back when I was growing up, candy was a penny, and you say, well, so 5 years ago, candy was 10 cents a piece. So inflation took over, and then you put out a statistic and say candy jumps 40%. You're like, oh my gosh, that is ridiculous. Well, if you take a look at it, though, 40% of 10 cents is 14 cents. So it's not a big darn deal, right?
Yeah.
We are not solving, world hunger or anything like that. But people will use those percentages all the time to try and sway the argument one way or the other. And in my opinion, if they don't have a basis for that, if they can't provide the basis for that, then that means you have to dig into it, because they're being lazy in how they're creating the facts. Because 60% of something sounds amazing, horrible, or great, but it may not really be when you look at the true facts. So the context is what's really, really important. And I think I know our time's winding down, so let me just, maybe we can cover it a little bit more next time. But I kind of teased last time about 2 + 2 = 4, right?
Yeah.
So first I'll ask you, do you think 2 + 2 = 4?
I always say 2 plus. I have a 5 and 7-year-old. He's in first grade. He came on the other day with math work, and 2 + 2 = 4, because that's what
right. Exactly.
Hard to ask me.
So in the book, I tell you, I can disprove that in about 30 seconds. And what is important when you say 2 + 2 = 4? What if I told you I have 2 oranges and 2 waffles? What does that equal? Doesn't equal oranges or orange waffles or anything like that, right?
It's
awful.
4. No, it doesn't. Yeah, it's
4 items maybe, right?
Yeah.
So the importance is the units. And so that's why I tell people, if you have 2 oranges and 2 pears, that might be the makings of a good fruit salad, but it does not equal 4. It's now the units have to come up to, it's 4 pieces of fruit, but it's not the apples or the oranges or whatever themselves. So I challenge people to say 2 + 2 = 4, only to say, what are the units? And that's just my way of saying, dig deeper into it, like I talked about with percentages and things. So I know we've got to end in a little bit, but maybe we could touch on this next time. And then next time I'd like to maybe deviate from the book, and I want to talk about something called the Leadership Manifesto.
Okay.
And what that is, and how I came upon it. It's not in the book, but it's a critical piece of leadership. So if that's okay with you, maybe we can cover that next time.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. My goodness. We still have 3 minutes left. Don't go
Oh,
anywhere.
excellent.
Go ahead. Go
Excellent.
ahead.
All right. So, maybe I'll leave you with this. One of the things, so I went to the Naval Academy, I told you that. And as we're talking about that's a fact, Jack, let me just read the midshipman honor concept. And the Naval Academy has an honor concept. It's not an honor code. At Air Force and at West Point, they have an honor code. And I'll tell you the difference in a minute. But let me read the midshipman concept, honor concept. Midshipmen are persons of integrity. They stand for that which is right. They tell the truth and ensure that the truth is known. They do not lie. They embrace fairness in all actions. They ensure that work submitted as their own is their own, and that assistance received from any source is authorized and properly documented. They do not cheat. They respect the property of others and ensure that others are able to benefit from the use of their own property. They do not steal. And that it ends there. And the two people who created that were Admiral Bill Lawrence, who was a mentor of mine when I was teaching at the Naval Academy, and then Ross Perot. You remember him from political elections and stuff. They developed the honor concept. So here's the big difference between that and at West Point or Air Force. They have a similar version of a cadet does not lie, cheat, or steal, but they add nor tolerate anyone who does the same. So that means essentially at those institutions, they are obligated to report if one of their peers does something wrong.
Yep.
At the Naval Academy, there's an implication there, but there are different ways that you can solve that. You can talk to the person, you can find out what really happened, but you can refer to an honor committee and they will decide if that midshipman should stay at the institution or not. So I have always gone by that as at least my aspirational model, to not lie, cheat, or steal. But the truth part was important about bringing things out and saying that's a fact, Jack.
I like that. That's a fact, Jack. I love it. Well, thank you so much, Tony, for being here. Would you mind sharing with our listeners how we can reach out to you, please?
Sure. You can reach me through my website, leadleftgrowright.com. You can go to one of the forums that are on there, contact form, and that will send an email directly to me and I'll be able to read it. You can reach out to me on my personal web email, tony.marolt@gmail.com. You can even call me at 816-694-4656. I'd love to hear from you, hear what you think of the cast, what you would like to hear perhaps in a future cast, because we're still going to be doing these for several more weeks.
Awesome.
So that's my contact info.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being here, for joining us. Looking forward to next week's conversation and hope you feel better.
All right.
Get
Thanks,
well.
Jill.
Thank
Take
you.
care. Bye-bye.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.